On everybody, it's Scooter from Scooter Snapshots Photography. What we have here today is a compilation of images that I took at the Oregon coast of Haystack Rock. There's 15 images here. We're going to turn into an HDR composition, high dynamic range composition. So each one of these files is taken at a different aperture size. I didn't change the shutter speed, I changed the aperture size. I'm shooting with a Canon 6D with a Rokinon 24mm 1.4 manual focus, manual aperture lens. Amazing lens. It was recommended for me for astrophotography, and I've just been having so much fun doing landscapes, especially HDR. I have so many exposures here because the manual aperture ring goes from 1.4 to 22, and I figured why not shoot every frame in a different aperture size and see if we can get the most out of this high dynamic range process. I understand you only need an overexposed, which would be on this end of the scale, and you would need your ideal frame, which captures the median tones that you're trying to get, and you're underexposed where you're going to get all the detail out of the highlights. The inverse of that is the overexposed. You're going to get all the detail in the shadows. So everything here that you can't see in the normal frame, in the normal exposure, everything here in these reflections and shadows, you're going to get tons of detail. So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to do any cropping. I'm not going to do any color changing. All I'm going to use are some profile corrections just so that they're all on the same page with all the same amount of distortion correction and correction for lens aberrations. So I'm just going to go ahead and enable that. I'm going to sync all 15 shots together, and then we're going to export these and do an application known as Photomatix Pro. Photomatix Pro is on its 6th iteration. I have just upgraded to Mojave on my MacBook, and I do have to admit there are some problems with compatibility, which we'll see a little bit later. But Photomatix Pro, it costs $99 for a license. It is the fastest, the most efficient method I have found so far of bringing everything into your workflow HDR wise, setting up a file so you can bring it back into Lightroom or bring it over into Photoshop and do the rest of your post processing. It has some really amazing presets. It is just a phenomenal piece of software. So without further ado, once you install the application, you can just export it. It pops up in your export menu. I'm going to export to Photomatix Pro. It gives you a few options. Basically, we want it to align the images. We want it to crop what we have. There's different presets. You can even shoot handheld. It'll have different algorithms for being able to align the images with a lot of movement going on. On the tripod, everything is just fantastic. It was shot from a tripod. I'm not going to worry about deghosting. I'm not going to talk about that subject today. We don't need to reduce any noise. We don't want to reduce any chromatic aberrations here, so we're going to go ahead and deselect that. It's going to re-import it right back into the Lightroom library with a different file name, where it's going to say this root image and 14 other images. It gives you some outputs. I'm going to stick with the 16-bit TIFF because it's just going to have so much more data there for us to work with. Alright, so that's finished importing over into Photomatix. So what we have is we have all of the 15 images. All of these frames are here organized by the exposure value. I'm going to stick with the default settings because all these exposure values are fairly accurate to what was done manually. You can even set a EV spacing for your exposure values. I'm not going to worry about that. I'm just going to go ahead and use the default settings here. Photomatix has finished importing and aligning the images, and this is what we have here. Now, unfortunately, when I upgraded my operating system from High Sierra to Mojave, Photomatix Pro 6 appears to have not exactly made the cut, and my presets are gone, which kind of sucks. But just to demonstrate how easy this program is to use, just with the normal setup that we have here, this is just phenomenal. I love this application. You have so many different tone tools here that you can play with. I mean, it's just absolutely phenomenal. The how much you can play with this range of tonality here. But I'm just going to go ahead and go back to the contrast optimizer. This is what I usually use. You can play with how much foreground lighting you have. I like to set it up for 100. It's going to be even better once you start playing with highlights. And then you can even tell it which photo to blend with. I'm going to go with the 0 exposure value, and we're gonna set this off here. So once it has saved all the settings that you've done previously in Photomatix, it gives you a bunch more options. You can even boost the contrast, which I really don't need to do. I'm just gonna stick with the none, because I'm gonna do all of my editing back in Lightroom. So we're gonna go ahead and re-import that into Lightroom. So here we have the image that we can do all of our adjustments to. First thing I'm gonna do is just get this nice and balanced in here. Which that's not working out so great. There we go. That's a little better. I'm just going to go ahead and get a little bit more of like a panoramic kind of a setup here. And then we're going to go ahead and play with some highlights and shadows. I'm going to bring up the blacks here a little bit. I'm going to boost the clarity. Just throwing a little bit of dehaze for a little bit of punch. I mean, you can even take out some of the vibrance and saturation, you know, if I really wanted to make this cool and moody. I'm just going to throw one of my little favorite effects in here. Just a shallow S curve with a little bit of fade to it. And we're starting to get just some real amazing effects out of this image that, you know, from photographic standpoint, you know, we were totally blown out. We just didn't have the data, the information in the file to really make this image pop as well. The Photomatix does a great job. I mean, if I just want to compare it with what we're working with, I mean, on a normal day, somebody's going to go shoot this photo and go, yeah, I got a sunset picture on the Oregon coast, but, you know, I really wish that it looked how it looked when I was there. And you get this, you know, you do this process and you just get this huge bam in your face. I mean, just amazing, absolutely amazing effects that you can get here with the Photomatix tool. I hope you guys enjoy. You know, have fun playing with this tool. I know I do.